This month's news was made possible by 621 Patreon supporters and by our proud sponsor, Surfshark VPN. Quite uncharacteristically, this month wasn't as terrible as we usually expect.
I've heard there was a secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord. But you don't really care for music, do you?
A war was ended, laws were passed, and a new focus on conservation can leave even the most pessimistic person optimistic for the future. But make no mistake, November also had its fair share of war crimes and atrocities. But among the infamously terrible year that 2020 has been for humanity, it's nice to be warmed even slightly by even the smallest of hopeful outlooks. For the 11th time this year, here was this month's news for November of 2020. Like always, we'll start by talking about everyone's favorite plague. Worldwide, 57 million people have contracted the virus, and unsurprisingly the United States, India, and Brazil remain in their undisputed podium positions in terms of confirmed cases. The European continent was a particular highlight this month, with nations such as France, the United Kingdom, and Spain all seeing a rapid growth in cases. The United States, never to be outdone, not only broke the record for the most amount of cases in the single day, at 100,000, but later smashed their own record by reaching nearly 200,000 in a single day. Other notable stories include Donald Trump Jr. and Elon Musk, both contracting the virus, and the Adelaide-based Woodville Pizza Bar locking down an entire Australian state after attempted tax evasion led to a 1.7 million person quarantine. Viewers who are interested in this clusterfuck are as always free to find all sources in the description. November proved to be a time for power changes, and the most notable needs no introduction. A nation that has been ravaged by the coronavirus, crippled by a dysfunctional system of government, and home to a proud people, not afraid to show their unending patriotism, to express their dearly held beliefs. I'm of course talking about the South American nation of Peru. The start of the month saw Martin Vizcarra, the president of Peru, get impeached by members of Congress and replaced by opposition lawmaker and businessman Manuel Moreno. Viewers who have been watching this series for any amount of time probably know exactly what happened next, as protests immediately erupted within the country, which resulted in at least 30 people arrested and at least 2 dead. The reason for the unrest is despite Martin Vizcarra leaving office without legally challenging Congress, he was nevertheless a widely popular leader, and according to a third-party poll, only 20% of Peruvians actually supported his impeachment. This is compounded by the laughably corrupt reputation of members of Congress, with over half under investigation for activities that include fraud, bribery, and corruption. This includes one member who has been using a different name in an attempt to hide past legal troubles, and another who is accused of fucking homicide. The reason for the impeachment has also come into question, as members of Congress made use of a rarely enacted constitutional clause, which allows them to remove the president if they are either mentally or morally unfit for office. This came after the president allegedly took around $640,000 in bribes in the early 2010s. However, Mr. Vizcarra has denied all charges, and no concrete evidence has yet been presented. After 6 days of protests, the country saw its third president in a week, a man named Francisco Sagasti, who seemed to be a more measured attempt to quell the rising levels of unrest. a senior researcher at Peru's capital of Lima, described the nation's Congress as a Molotov cocktail and explained that there were three main factors to this level of dysfunction. The first of which was its weak and fragmented party system, which instead of encouraging members to adopt ideologies, instead encouraged them to shift their alliances to suit their own interests. The second was the lack of strict limits on campaign financing, which, as you could probably guess, allowed businesses with enough fat stacks lying around to outright buy influence within Congress itself. The third factor was that due to a 2018 referendum, members of Congress could now only serve a single term. Although this was designed to eventually weed out bad actors from within Congress, it instead has provided less incentives for members to create any lasting sense of stability and encourages these troublemakers to simply take bribes more quickly. As of time of writing, the Constitutional Court within Peru has yet to intervene, which is presumably because its members are elected by the same members of Congress who decided to get rid of the president. It's not currently clear whether the political instability within the nation of Peru will improve anytime soon, but the Magic 8 Ball at Swag News headquarters indicates that all signs point to absolutely fucking not. As it turns out, the United States also had its fair share of political festivity this month when the presidential election between Donald Trump and Joe Biden kicked off on the 3rd of November. I'd once again like to remind first-time viewers that I'm an Australian citizen and find it firmly in my best interest not to take sides. In terms of the House of Representatives, the Democratic Party lost 5 seats to members of the Republican Party, which still maintains a narrow Democratic majority. This reduction in seats has caused somewhat of a schism between the centrist and progressive wings of the party, and many of its members are now wondering the best overall direction going forward. Moving on to the Senate, the Republican Party is expected to maintain at least half the positions after the election. 2 particular Senate races concluded without a candidate receiving at least 50% of the vote, and as a result, the top 2 candidates from each election will face off in a runoff election next year. These 2 seats both happen to be from the state of Georgia. The 2 races set for January will ultimately decide whether there is a Republican majority in the Senate or a 50-50 split between the 2 parties. We now come to who won the presidency, which, as expected, can never be fucking easy, as initially, both candidates declared victory. In terms of individual votes, Joe Biden won by roughly 6 million ballots. However, because of electoral college fuckery, state population density, and the expectations of swing states to determine elections, every vote isn't necessarily equally valuable. For example, according to some estimates, a single vote in a state such as California is worth less than a third when compared to a citizen of Wyoming. As a result, the US has a handful of especially valuable states that aren't reliably either Republican or Democrat, which ultimately determine the results for the rest of the country. This is important to keep in mind, because although a 6 million vote disparity is difficult to contest, a critical swing state with less than a 20,000 vote difference is much easier to challenge. Since April this year, President Trump has become one of the most prominent proponents of the notion that mail-in voting leads to fraud, and many members of the Republican Party have campaigned against its use in the election. The Swag News team has extensively covered these claims of mail-in ballots leading to voter fraud in the past, and according to a study conducted by the Conservative Heritage Foundation and MIT, only 143 ballots of 250 million of mail-in votes cast over the last 20 years have resulted in criminal convictions. President Trump has since filed a myriad of lawsuits in 5 different states on the basis of voter fraud and successfully encouraged a recount in the state of Georgia, which narrowly changed the results but did not ultimately flip the state. As of time of writing, Joe Biden has won 306 electoral votes to Mr. Trump's 232, meaning that unless something absolutely batshit crazy happens within the next few months, Parks and Recreation star Joe Biden will undoubtedly be sworn into office on January 21, 2021. The conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan over the Nagorno-Karabakh region has now come to a close. The region that is culturally and ethnically Armenian, but widely recognized as part of Azerbaijan, has been largely claimed by the latter, with Armenia signing a peace deal to concede all territory recently lost in the long disputed area. The treaty comes after 6 weeks of fighting between the two nations since the end of September, which saw Turkey heavily support Azerbaijani forces with foreign fighters and air support. Almost immediately after the treaty was signed, a wave of celebration overtook the nation of Azerbaijan, but understandably, the same could not be said about their Armenian counterparts. Large crowds gathered in the capital of Yerevan to protest the agreement, and many even broke into parliament and other government buildings, including some citizens who ransacked the residence of the prime minister himself. The day after the treaty was signed, the president of the Armenian National Assembly was pulled from his car, beaten by a mob, and later underwent surgery for his injuries. The protesters accused the government of betrayal and claimed that had there not been a ceasefire, they would have won the war. Experts on the field and leaders within the Nagorno-Karabakh region disagree with this sentiment and have admitted that had the fighting continued, Armenia would have lost the city of Stepanakert, the region's biggest municipality. Both sides have both denied and accused each other of killing civilians during the conflict, and casualties will vary depending on which side you ask. However, official Russian sources place combined casualties at around 5,000 from the start of the conflict. The world has truly entered strange times when Russia is the most reliable source of information. A human rights lawyer working at the United Nations has blown the whistle on members within the intergovernmental organization, passing sensitive information on to the Chinese government. In an exclusive interview, longtime human rights lawyer Emma Riley explained that her boss would give the names of Chinese dissidents planning to attend human rights sessions to government officials in China upon request, and has claimed this had been taking place since at least 2013. Longtime viewers to this series will surely recall China's terrible human rights record, including killing democracy within Hong Kong and its ongoing genocide of the ethnic Uyghur people in the eastern parts of the Chinese mainland. With this in mind, it's understandably alarming when supposedly the bastion for human rights is found to be actively assisting an authoritarian government in committing a genocide of an estimated 1 million people within its borders. Ms. Riley's attempts to bring the matter to attention within the United Nations has so far been unsuccessful, with her boss since being promoted, while she was subsequently sidelined. The United Nations has complete diplomatic immunity, so the only way this situation could be resolved is through an internal authority. However, they have yet to act on the matter. In terms of the Chinese internment camps, 39 UN nations have condemned the facilities as of October this year. However, 45 member countries still support the practice. If one thing is for certain, genocide is pretty fucking cringe. On the 13th of November, the offices of Ubisoft Montreal were reported to have been involved in an armed robbery turned hostage situation, which escalated into a multi-hour special forces operation to evacuate employees from the building. The situation was later found to be a hoax. However, a cybersecurity expert has admitted that whoever called in the threat knew how to mask their identity. Unofficial experts told the Swag News team that the situation was likely caused by a matchmaking error that failed to load in the defending team. However, because the hostage situation isn't in the competitive rotation, Canadian Special Forces are not expected to lose any SR over the incident. Viewers who are also trying to commit a federal crime will be particularly interested in today's sponsor. If you're trying to remain invisible online, or just want to watch region-locked content, then you'll probably want a VPN. Contrary to popular belief, Surfshark VPN isn't just for sharks and other aquatic marine life within the Elasmobranchii subclass of fish, but humans can make use of its ability to both protect their online privacy and find a wealth of new Netflix content exclusive to other nations. No longer do you need to painstakingly search dodgy backstreet markets to watch the adventures of Shark Boy and Lava Girl. Simply send yourself to an online trip to Brazil and enjoy the greatest film 2005 has to offer. Signing up with the code on screen will give viewers an 84% discount, 4 months for free, and viewers who aren't 100% satisfied can back out in the first 30 days and get a full refund. Surfshark VPN It's cheaper than the other ones.
And welcome back to News Without the BS.
Australia tends to be good at many things, including making a good coffee, digging for shit in the ground, and dominating in a sport that only they seem to like. Recently, however, an internal defense force report has concluded that Kangaroo Land is also quite good at committing war crimes. A recently released investigation has revealed that due to what can be described as perhaps the most extreme case of toxic workplace culture, Australian Special Forces soldiers killed as many as 39 Afghan civilians in non-combat situations, many of whom were prisoners. Some evidence suggests that junior soldiers were instructed to execute prisoners as a kind of initiation process, and that often these deeply unethical patrol commanders were seen as kind of hero worship demigods by their subordinates. The report suggested that because of an ingrained warrior culture and the small pool of candidates which necessitated longer and more frequent deployments, the Australian SAS tended to have more leniency in terms of their conduct while abroad. Heavy drinking by members was tolerated on base, a culture of secrecy kept one patrol's actions from another, and a separate review described a kind of organizational blindness to the actions of the special forces by higher-ranking members of the military. Some of the individual incidents are particularly confronting. One occasion involved SAS soldiers stopping a pair of 14-year-old boys, determining they might be Taliban sympathizers, slitting their throats, and throwing them in a nearby river. Another incident saw an Afghan man used as target practice, and a third instance caught on camera of a straight-up execution in a wheat field. A United States Marine has also alleged that Australian troops killed a civilian after being told there wasn't enough room on a helicopter. 19 individuals are currently under investigation by Australian Federal Police for similar incidents. The US state of Oregon has become the first in the country to decriminalize the possession of hard drugs. The initiative aims to dramatically change how the state's justice system treats people caught with small amounts of anything from cocaine to methamphetamine, and will strive to treat drug addiction as a medical issue as opposed to a criminal offense. Citizens within the state found in possession of these substances will now be given a choice of either paying a $100 fine or attending the state's new addiction recovery centers, free of charge. The centers themselves are funded by tax revenue from cannabis sales, which have been sold recreationally within the state since 2017. Although seen as a radical concept, even among many progressive circles within the United States, other nations around the world have already had long-standing decriminalization stances for decades. The country of Portugal famously decriminalized drug possession nationwide back in 2000, which not only saw no increase in drug use overall, but increased the amount of people treated for drug addiction by 20% over the following 8 years. Opponents of the legislation have argued that the new measures in Oregon would increase the acceptability of dangerous drugs. However, supporters have reasoned that society at large would be better served to help individuals overcome this kind of crippling addiction, rather than spend enormous amounts of money to punish those afflicted. In the war on drugs, drugs have emerged victorious, and the United States will now need to decide whether to continue its bafflingly expensive and ineffective hardline stance, or to accept that no one addicted to meth really gives a shit about the law anyway. Meanwhile, the UK Prime Minister is accused of listening to stupid nerd doctors for his COVID-19 policies. Twitch suspends the guitarist of Dragon Force for playing his own music, and McDonald's suddenly becomes more environmentally friendly than Greenpeace. One of the most requested stories that didn't quite make it into our news cycle last month was Poland's largest public demonstrations since the 1980s. Best known for cyberpunk making up its largest export and invasions comprising its most significant import, Poland has made headlines by mustering a gargantuan 430,000 protesters after the country's high court ruled that abortion should only be granted when the woman's life is in danger or if the pregnancy was the result of a crime. As 98% of all abortions within the country are currently conducted as a result of fetal defects, this ruling would essentially ban the practice entirely within the nation. More than 400 communities took to the streets in some form or another, with some even entering churches and disrupting services. Despite Poland having a conservative government currently in power, one of the biggest reasons for this ruling is that the church and state within the country are very much intertwined, and the Catholic Church has an impressive range of resources within the nation. This includes receiving an estimated $250 million to $1 billion a year in government funding, owning 300 newspapers and the densest radio network in Europe, and government-funded Catholic education in public schools. The question of abortion has been a long-standing point of contention between the Catholic Church and women's rights groups for decades, with advocates pointing to health, bodily autonomy, and a child's quality of life concerns as reasons to keep the practice widely available. However, when there is a fundamental disagreement between when life starts, whether that be at conception or sometime during the formation of a human, it is unlikely that there will be any degree of compromise when both sides are not able to agree on the basic facts of the debate. The plan to nearly outright ban abortion within Poland has since been scrapped, but was later taken to the nation's highest court. However, experts don't expect this to stop the new laws from going forward. The protests that were initially founded on women's rights later encompassed a myriad of other demands, including the removal of religion from schools, action on climate change, expanded animal rights, and improved health services. It is unclear as of time of writing whether these demands will be met. However, when nearly a third of the country is officially made up of gay-free zones, those protesting are likely going to find these changes to be difficult to enact. A Canadian startup called Flash Forest has started using specially modified drones to rapidly plant trees. This is done by hovering over suitable fields and firing seed pods into the ground, and the company plans to use this technology to plant 40,000 trees within a single month. Flash Forest is far from the only startup with the same idea, with many working toward the goal of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change to plant 1 billion hectares of forest, which is roughly the size of the entire United States. As of currently, Flash Forest is able to plant 10 to 20,000 seed pods a day, compared to an extremely efficient experienced planter who may be able to plant 5,000 trees over the same period. The company hopes that as their technology improves, a pair of pilots will be able to plant up to 100,000 trees a day. However, this will of course depend on the rate of germination. In terms of funding, the business model of these startups looks to be quite solid, as much of their revenue comes from direct government contracts or mining companies who are required by law to replant trees. Experts within the SWAG News team predict that should the US Air Force start carpet bombing vast swaths of wilderness with similar technology, humans would reverse an estimated 40 years of climate change within around 7 minutes. The UK government has also made a bold commitment to tackle climate change this month, which saw Boris Johnson's government pledge £12 billion toward what they are calling a green industrial revolution. The 10-point plan aims to power every home within the nation with offshore wind power by 2030, develop a new generation of small nuclear reactors, and aim to make the City of London the global centre for green finance. One of the biggest announcements, however, was the United Kingdom's commitment of banning the sale of all new petrol and diesel cars within the next 10 years, and to assign £4.3 billion toward electric vehicle grants and the infrastructure to support them. The entire plan is estimated to support 250,000 jobs within the United Kingdom. However, the opposition Labour Party criticised the plan for not being nearly ambitious enough to both kickstart an effective COVID-19 recovery or remotely meet the scale of the climate change emergency. Despite these criticisms, the plan saw an immediate effect within the UK, as according to an online car retailer within the nation, interest in electric vehicle purchases increased by 500% from the previous month. The cost of electric vehicles is currently out of reach for many drivers looking for a new set of wheels, but in an attempt to encourage greener alternatives, many countries have started providing generous incentives to both buyers and sellers of electric vehicles. The United States offers up to a $7,500 tax rebate on clean vehicles, while France will give you money to both trade in diesel cars and transition to an electric model. Norway, on the other hand, is on another plane of existence entirely, with electric vehicles being exempt from sales tax, annual road tax, and in some cases, don't even pay for parking or toll roads. This same sentiment seems to be a long way from being shared across the globe, with extreme cases, such as a handful of states in Kangaroo Land, planning to specifically tax electric vehicles per kilometer. When the Swag News team reached out to the Australian Minister of Transport for a comment of the proposed tax, they started rambling about riding Eternal, Shiny, and Chrome to the gates of Valhalla before spraying silver paint over their mouth and jumping out of their office window. YouTube has continued its tradition of making fucking awful decisions this month when it found even more ways to introduce ads to its platform. A recent update to its terms of service includes a right to monetize channels that don't qualify for the YouTube Partner Program. This means that newer creators with less than 4,000 combined watch hours over the last 12 months, or with fewer than 1,000 subscribers, might be forced to host ads on their videos, but have no way of actually getting paid for the privilege. Viewers in the United States can expect to see these changes come into effect first. However, they will be enacted worldwide by the end of 2021. YouTube did however partly make up for this decision after it announced that there would not be a YouTube Rewind.
Fortnite and Marquez Brownlee.
Set for the end of this year. This comes after the 2018 and 2019 installments of Rewind claimed the first and fifth place spots for the most disliked videos on the platform, often being criticized for being out of touch with the YouTube community. In gaming, according to a Tokyo-based game analyst, Square Enix has made a $63 million loss following the weak release of Marvel's Avengers in early September. The entire game was estimated to have cost around $100 million to make, which is around $45 million more than The Witcher 3, and almost exactly the same as Skyrim. However, by some estimates, the cost of marketing almost doubles this initial figure. Marvel's Avengers was heavily criticized for a long list of technical and gameplay issues at launch, as well as an extremely aggressive business model, which included a battle pass for every character in an already full-priced game. The title has so far seen an average player count of less than 800 people online, which in some cases has caused matchmaking times to exceed 30 minutes. The Swag News team would like to extend their deepest condolences to Square Enix, as there was no way of knowing that releasing an extremely expensive unfinished game with aggressive monetization would result in such catastrophic backlash. Games released this month included Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Black Ops Cold War, the newest Marvel Spider-Man, Dirt 5, Destiny 2 Beyond Light, Godfall, and both the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5. Games releasing in December include Cyberpunk and every other game that was crazy enough to release in the same month as this upcoming sales powerhouse. The team is working on a Cyberpunk related video that will be out before the game's launch on December 10th. With the close of this month's news, it now leaves only one more entry into the series for the year. Next month, we plan to release a survey for News Without the Bullshit, which will hopefully allow us to get a better understanding about the preferred format, topics, and opinions on some new ideas we'd like to try. We are also working on a behind the scenes look at how we make the news every month, which we are aiming to release this time next month for the Patreon supporters who make the series possible. In terms of December, viewers can expect a very special video around 6 months in the making, which is not only the most expensive we've made to date, but as far as we're aware, the first of its kind in the world. Fingers crossed, we don't have to delay it any further. Viewers who are so inclined can follow the channel or find all our sources through the neatly organized links in the description. But until next time, the entire team would like to wish everyone watching a happy December of 2020.
Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah.